welcome to today's Censinet Champions Real Stories, Remarkable Change. We have Jigar Kadakia from Emory Healthcare, and I'm delighted to have Ed Gaudet, CEO and founder for Censinet. And Jigar, thank you so much for being with us. So I'll leave you guys to it. Enjoy.
All right, all right.
Thank you.
So I'm maybe we just start with your role and a little bit about the healthcare system, JR, for folks that may not be familiar with Emory.
Yeah. So Emory Healthcare. So I'm the VP and Chief Information Security Officer. Emory is located in Atlanta, Georgia. It's part of Emory University. We have 11 hospital locations as well as a number of sites around the greater metro Atlanta area. We share many facilities with our university colleagues as we, run the healthcare side of the business and teach the future physicians, clinicians in our environment.
All right, excellent, excellent. So we're going to start off with the agenda. So this is if you've been to one of these webinars before, this agenda will look familiar. So we will explore what third-party risk looked like at Emory before Censinet. We'll dive into the evaluation and selection criteria for bringing Censinet in, and why Jigar and the team chose Censinet, and how we're helping them today to manage their third parties and do it in a way that saves them time and creates a number of efficiencies, but also enables clearer fidelity of information and accuracy of data as we think about risk, security risk associated with a number of different technologies and products out there and vendors, obviously. And then we'll explore the broader organizational impact of automating and transforming your third-party risk program through tools like Censinet. Sound good? All
Perfect.
right.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So yeah, I know this will be a little unique for folks because obviously we've worked with you in the past and when you were at Mass General Brigham, but before you really brought us in, before you brought the Censinet tool in, what did third-party risk look like at Emory?
As with most organizations, third party was leveraging spreadsheets, SharePoint drives, moving a lot of files back and forth, with a lot of manual intervention and analysis, collecting documents, moving things through the workflow, whatever the workflow was for the organization, whether it's our organization or another organization. And so it was a lot of, I don't want to say bureaucracy, but a lot of different files being moved and transferred and stored and shared so that there wasn't always a consistent location for many of these files, hence the leveraging of SharePoint to try to consolidate that. And clearly the questionnaires were typically either Word documents or spreadsheets. And with spreadsheets, you'd have a lot of version control issues and updates to the spreadsheets, and then how those were completed and the timing it took to kind of complete just the assessment process, working with our third parties. Sometimes it could be 30 days to 60 days, maybe even longer. It depended on kind of where the third party was in our contracting process and where and how urgent there was on their end to complete the questionnaire as part of the evaluation, before we would purchase a service. And so depending on the urgency of their timelines and the urgency of our business, that would help drive maybe some of the assessment duration and completion time. So, it was a very complicated process with a lot of manual interventions and a lot of workflow data collection, et cetera, to try to complete the assessments. The reassessment process, as a strong, mature third-party risk program would have, was hard to implement because we're spending so much time on just doing the basic assessments.
Yeah, that's a great point. You brought up the curation of that data just to get the questionnaires in shape with the right and the relevant questions, obviously, for intake of data. So can you talk a little more about that and the challenges that your organization or other organizations have had in the past that you've seen?
Yeah, so organizations in general have typically started with what I would call a standard set of questions. That was probably 5, 6 years ago. Now, organizations have tried to shrink the number of questions and be more applicable to the type of service, whether it was a cloud service, a consulting service, on-prem service, SaaS service, et cetera. Curating a set of questions for the type of service that the third party was providing, that became the bigger challenge in today's world, is each set of questions trying to curate it to the type of service, which took more time from the teams because the less questions, the more likelihood of getting a fast response. And in general, if you look across the spectrum, whether in healthcare or finance or whatnot, there was probably in general, most questionnaires were in the 600-700 question range. Most of the questionnaires were not smart based, meaning if you answered a question in one way, it would give you a subset of questions. And if you answered it a different way, maybe you moved on to the next question. So the logic wasn't there. The branch logic associated questions typically wasn't there, or if it was there, someone spent time to develop the logic. So both sets of creating the logic as well as questions based on system type and application type or third party type had to be curated, which took a lot of time amongst the different teams.
Yeah, and also I imagine the rating of that data also, and the prioritization of that data also had to be curated in kind.
Yeah, so I mean, with all third-party assessments, you have you're looking for data about an organization. So the questionnaire is a start to the process to see, what the type of security, privacy posture they have in place. The other aspect of this is they will send you documents, whether it's a SOC report or high trust certification or their policies and other documents. So then you have to read those documents as part of the workflow and analysis to determine the level of risk to your organization based on a criteria that you have set forth, or maybe based on some type of best practice criteria that may exist out there around third-party risk.
Yeah, and I imagine try to find context of that data and that evidence, any gaps that exist, and then go back and gather more information.
Yeah. So as you identify gaps, you have to work with them to develop a remediation plan associated with the gaps to reduce the risk, or come up with alternative options, complementary controls, et cetera, to try to get manage the risk, third-party risk overall.
Right, which again is another curation activity, which takes time away from the team, which could be focused on obviously the risk management activities. All right, so let's talk about what you looked for in a tool, and let's talk about also how that informed your overall process, which obviously was probably set up to work well with the manual tools that you were using.
Yeah, so with regards to tools, there were a number of tools out in the ecosystem that addressed maybe many of the components as third-party risks. So there are tools in other technologies that do similar things or have similar functions. I think one, my previous experience with Censinet was a driver. here. I think the ease of use of Censinet was also part of the driver, and then more importantly, it created a centralized repository for all the documentation within the system. But the greatest benefit that I found was you can call it crowdsourcing aspect of it, or however you want to define it. But once a vendor had been assessed, they could release their info to another third party or another customer very quickly without having to go through the process of redoing a questionnaire that would be very similar, if not the same, as one of their other customers. So that increased the speed of our assessments, and it helped us quickly get to resolution of any third-party risk because we had more time to do the analysis of the data, as well as some of the workflow inside of Censinet helped bridge the gap for us as well. With what I mean by that is, based on how they answered the questionnaire, which was a standard questionnaire, they got logical questions, and then based on that, we got a set of reports or results, and then we could quickly identify areas of risk that either were predefined to us or areas that maybe we think are more important, and that way we could really target the areas of risk with the vendor and really focus on those areas versus everything, every question in the questionnaire.
Right. So things like the automated cap, which is also curated, the ratings are all curated, the questionnaire, obviously, those are all curated based on vendor, organization, the product that is in question, that's being reviewed, whether it's a technical product, a cloud or non-cloud, on-premise solution, or could be a hardware device or IoT device, or also services as well. When you think about that, were you able to increase the number of assessments you were able to do? Were you able to get better insight into what was happening within your ecosystem? What were some of the benefits that you were able to
So I think first and foremost was the speed, reduction of time to get the initial assessment completed, right? So in the old days or pre-Censinet days, we'd have to send a questionnaire, try to ping the vendor to update or answer the questionnaire and collect the documentation. That took a while for us previously. Now Censinet, especially if it's a vendor that's already responded to a questionnaire, we can get those results very quickly. And then based on those results, it allows us to do the analysis, a more thorough analysis on the risk, and then work with the vendor to develop risk mitigation plans. And then lastly, something that was hard for us to do previously, but easier to do now, is we can schedule for reassessments. So whether it's a 12-month cycle, 18-month cycle, 24-month cycle, depending on the risk of the vendor, we're able to kind of go through a workflow and kind of reassess vendors. If a vendor, change or optum occurs, an incident occurs, we can go back to our questionnaire that was answered by the vendor, and quickly do a reassessment of the vendor in case of that, or identify, review the remediation plans that the vendor may have provided, and then follow up in the case of any type of incident or ransomware type activity. And the biggest thing for me has been the crowdsourcing aspect of it, both on the vendor side and potentially on the customer side. But with a database of a lot of vendors, different components of vendors, products of the vendors, being able to leverage or re-leverage the questionnaires and getting the data from the vendor has been very beneficial to us. Really has shrunk the speed to collect the data and allowed us to focus more in on the analysis portion.
Excellent. And do you think that crowdsourcing activity where Emory's doing it and Intermountain and, another 100 or so providers are doing the same type of activity across the network and across the ecosystem. Do you believe that's helping the vendors to begin to really not only do the right thing, but develop a much more mature security program over the course of the, 3 or 4 years you've been working with us?
Yeah, I hope it is. I don't have any empirical data to support it, but I hope it is improving their security posture, et cetera. Clearly, if we're all using the same vendor, then we're all asking the same question through Censinet, and most likely developing the same risk tolerance and hopefully coming up with the same remediation plan. So hopefully, um, if vendor A has been assessed by 4 of us and we all have the same kind of remediation plan, that they're fixing the remediation plan. So when another customer or a colleague of ours assesses them, then the risk probably should have gone away because they've remediated it. So hopefully, as an ecosystem, we're improving security because everyone's going to be identifying similar risks and then hoping that the vendor or working with the vendor to remediate those risks.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. All right, so let's go into, we talked a little bit about a lot of these things already,
Yep.
but what are some of the changes the tool helped inform across your overall process? Were there adjustments you made? Were there efficiencies that you instituted because now you had a tool that enabled you to do things that you couldn't do in the past?
Yeah, so clearly, I think priority one was speed. And so getting assessments done more quickly to be more responsive to the business was priority one for us. And I think we have accomplished that, leveraging Censinet and the crowdsourcing capabilities of the existing vendor population. We have done essentially more assessments in a shorter amount of a time with the existing staff. So we didn't have to bring on additional staff to do more assessments. We're able to do as many assessments or more assessments because some of the heavy lifting was already being done for us with the previous customers inside of Censinet. So now we have much more time to do the analysis, identify the risk, and really work with the vendor on the remediation of the risk. We have better dashboard capabilities, so we kind of know where we are in the workflow. Whether the vendor is how far along the vendor is in completing the questionnaire, how long it's taking the vendor to complete the questionnaire, those type of things. We have much more capability, visibility to understand where we are in the workflow. So it's easier to communicate the status of the vendor and the progress of the risk assessment. Those things are all very important and has helped improve our ability to do third-party risk assessments and manage our third-party risk.
Excellent, excellent. And so I know we've talked about the other side of the equation, the enterprise risk programs. So how are you leveraging the capabilities in the platform today, or how are you thinking about it in the future?
Well, most importantly, the benchmarking data is really useful. So being able to benchmark against our peers across the entire kind of NIST framework is really important to see where we are and how we stand against not just the entire ecosystem that's in Censinet, but specifically academic medical centers or nonprofits or however you define it. We can get to a subset of peer group that is more related to us so that we can see the benchmarking. The NIST analysis or the NIST benchmarking also provides us the ability to kind of do this cybersecurity NIST framework maturity model. So it allows us to see how mature we are as it relates to the NIST requirements, whether we're a level 1, level 2, level 3 from an overall maturity standpoint, and tells us how mature we are against our peer group. So we have the ability to kind of have the conversation about what we want to do, how we want to mature as an organization across the NIST domains, whether it's the 5 domains: identify, protect, detect, etc., or the CMMI model around the maturity models. But either way, we have the ability to kind of look at what our peers are doing without having to reach out to someone else to get the peer benchmarking data, which I think is one of the biggest value adds for me.
And we'll be kicking off the Wave 4 in September, which will include the update to NIST CSF to be 2.0. So we're moving from 1.1. So we'll be adding governance to the overall functional areas. When you think about working with your partners, obviously, I'm sure you work with a number of vendors. How important is trust to you, and how do you define that within the context of those partners that you currently work with?
So trust is very important, right? So we have to have trust with our vendor partners, especially in the technology space, because we're relying on them to provide a level of protection on top of the cybersecurity controls that we may put in place, in addition to what already may be in place. Most of our vendors, if you think about them, are tens of billions of dollars, are worth tens of billions of dollars, or even more, hundreds of billions of dollars, and so they have the resources and capabilities to do security at a level that maybe more potentially more secure than us, and then they also have a better footprint and feeling of what's happening in the threat landscape with regards to bad actors. So having trust in them and their ability to communicate risks and areas of concern to us immediately is important from a relationship standpoint and a trust standpoint. So I think it's very important to have trust in the vendor and their ability to help you solve problems and protect you against potential problems.
What advice would you share with a new vendor that maybe you may be onboarding as it relates to building that trust with you and Emory?
Yeah, so I think you need to spend time, provide data and analysis, and work with us to optimize whatever solution or tool or whatever we bought, so that we can optimize and leverage it to its full capability. Historically, across the cyberspace and even in the technology space, whether it's healthcare, finance, or whatever industry, most organizations are only leveraging probably in general, about 50% of the capabilities of the tools that they have. If they would be able to leverage 80% of the capabilities, maybe they could reduce the number of tools, because they're able to leverage more of a singular tool or platform. And so the more you can leverage, the less complex it is, and maybe potentially you might get better value out of it, and it may provide insight and visibility that you may not have before.
Excellent. And how does your trust with a partner like Censinet help you facilitate trust across your ecosystem?
Well, I mean, Censinet has built a healthcare focused third-party risk model that many of my peers are using as part of their third-party risk program. And so continuing to work with us to modify, enhance, create options, take our feedback is really critical in kind of how we want to operate, so that we can get the data and the results that we're looking for in the third-party risk space.
Yeah, and I think also that facilitation of transparency on either side is really helpful. I know that I've worked in the past with customers that have well, I'll just say a hint of paranoia and skepticism as it relates to the responses that a vendor will provide. But a system like this provides and facilitates that transparency. So it really pays to be transparent about where you are And I know that I've worked with you in the past,
Yep.
not only here, but when I was over at Imprivata as well.
Yeah.
And, having that level of transparency and trust in that relationship early on is so important.
Yeah, I think that's important. And the consistency, we're all getting the same results
Mm,
coming out of this. So there's the inputs in are producing the same results for each one of us because the vendor questionnaire is being answered once and then distributed to many. And so we're all coming to very similar conclusions um, based on, the vendor responses. So there's a consistency in what we see across the peer group.
yeah. And lastly, I know this isn't directly related to the product, but it's sort of a soft value that we provide and offer to customers. And you've been a very active member of our customer advisory board. You were an early design partner, obviously, of Censinet. You really helped us build out the platform when you were at Mass General. But as you think about the programs like the customer advisory board program, how does that help you connect with peers, and how does it help you with sharing insight and best practices?
Well, customer advisory boards are, I think, important not to learn and about what's happening and what the future state is going to be, but more importantly, connecting with the peers to
Hmm.
see what issues, challenges that they're facing, and maybe you can glean some ideas that you can take back to your organization or provide them with ideas that they can take back to the organization. Most of us are facing the same main issues. They're probably, if you name the top five cyber-related issues, I can, out of a group of 10 of us, I bet you all five would be the same. It would just be in a different order.
Hmm.
Some might view something as one, where someone else might view it as five, but we're all probably having the same five issues. Just prioritization is different within the organization and different amongst the peer group based on other factors within the organization, but the top five issues are probably the same.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so
All right,
we got a couple questions that came in. Let me
really?
just yeah, really. Yeah. All right. So first one is, can you talk about the implementation process? How hard slash easy was it?
So I would say it was probably fairly easy. I had gone through it once before, so I had some lessons learned and whatnot, but it was fairly easy. Once you got it connected into your ecosystem and your environment, getting single sign-on set up, I think, is one of the critical pieces in this. And then once you're connected, training the users of this. So training my team, educating them on the workflows, um, learning about how the questionnaire works, learning about the risk report readouts, what the risks mean, and the different dashboards. That's really the learning that takes a little bit of time. So those are, I think, the key things. So I think implementation is relatively easy. You can put it in your workflow and add it into your workflow, but learning how to use the platform itself and the tips and tricks are the area that you have to really focus in on. And we had a lot of webinars, Zoom sessions, et cetera, to walk through the platform, doing a few pilots up front with a vendor just so you can see how it works is also was very beneficial to us.
Excellent. Next question. Have you had any learnings, and have you implemented any policy changes to help with vendors that, um, refuse to go into a portal or participate in a system like this?
So to date, we haven't had anyone refusing to go in. I think more most likely, most every vendor that we're assessing was probably already a vendor of some other customer in the ecosystem.
Hmm.
And so I don't think we faced anyone blatantly saying no. Now, sometimes we have to follow up because the contact info of the person supposed to filling out the questionnaire may be incorrect, or the person may have left the organization. So sometimes we have to follow up to find the right contact to get the vendor to fill out a questionnaire if it's new. But other than that, we haven't had any major issues.
Okay. And then last question, and I don't know if you went through this in detail, but did you have any lessons learned from the recent Change Health data breach that you care to share?
So I think the biggest couple lessons coming out of the Change Healthcare data breach is one. I think business continuity / resiliency. So Change Healthcare was what, a third or a quarter of the entire healthcare ecosystem. So between the claims processing and the other things Change did on behalf of the vast majority of healthcare providers and doctors in the US, having a backup plan, a more defined backup plan for these processes, I think was the biggest learning. So all the critical processes inside an organization that rely on a vendor, and where there are very few vendors in the space, having a continuity plan in place to be trained on it, understand what the options are so that people can switch, I think is critical, because most of these vendors are behemoths or single-threaded, and there are very few in the space that can play the same role. And that's what I think most people discovered out of the Change Healthcare space is we relied on Change, and there were very few options. And then Change's outage lasted for weeks, and so a lot of people were, hurt by it.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's it. Well, thank you so much again for your time today, Jigar,
Thank you.
and your insight. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed.